What does the future of diplomacy has in the world shaped by power and conflict?
Well, actually, this one is a case of either being a realist or idealist. But looking at the global stance now, we have endured idealism a lot. Enough. It is the high time countries should possess their own weapon. It is high time countries should have their own weapon, you have their own arsenal because of deterrence. Because what is happening today, if countries are not powerful enough and they don't have their own weapon in their own disposition or in their own possession, I am telling you that there will be a time that we are going to have a new wave of recolonization, direct recolonization, not indirect recolonization. Because in as much as a Venezuela president Maduro will be arrested, and then tell me who is free? In as much as
I don't think anybody.
Ayatollah Khomeini will be killed alongside with other defense ministers and his family, tell me who is free? Nobody is free. And this one has keep on going on and on and on, where we can set example with Muhammad Gaddafi, we can set example with Saddam Hussein, all of them.
Thomas Sankara of
Burkina Faso, even here in Africa. So in as much as the West are good in doing this, then we should have our nuclear weapon, the way the Jin Commun is doing, the way the Russian president Vladimir Putin is doing, and the way the Chinese president is also doing, the way the Castro of Cuba is doing. Because in as much as we say we are going to be using only the diplomatic way, I am telling you that there will be a new wave of what? Recolonization.
Is war truly the failure of diplomacy, or is it another instrument used by nation-states to pursue their interests? Throughout history, nation-states struggle to balance power and peace. At times, diplomacy prevents conflicts. At other times, it merely delays it. So, what exactly is the relationship between war, power, and diplomacy? Are they opposites, or are they deeply connected forces shaping global politics? These and more are some of the issues we'll be discussing on the program. Welcome to Diplomatic Talk, brought to you by Hardball Media, a platform where we bring you in-depth analysis and engaging discussion on global affairs ranging from politics, international security, and socio-economic matters. And on this edition of the program, we are going to be discussing war, power, and its profound impact on world diplomacy and peace. I am Lazarus Joshua Yushowu, and joining us on the program is Mr. Mohammed Ayuba, a lecturer from the Department of Political Science and International Relations, Kaduna State University. He is going to be giving us insight and his expert perspective on this topic, which we are about to discuss. Good to have you, sir.
Thank you very much.
So, sir, let's look at war, power, and diplomacy. We all know that the international system cannot be explained or cannot nation states cannot relate, they cannot connect, they cannot have bilateral or multilateral relationship without looking at these three critical concepts. I will look at a case study of the Israel-Gaza war. Israel-Gaza war, there is the aspect of the war, there is the aspect of the diplomacy, and the aspect of power. In the aspect of diplomacy, there is two-state solution proposal, and the aspect of what they were engaged directly confrontation, as well as the aspect of power, they all shows their military capabilities. Now, looking at war, power, and diplomacy, what are the conceptual clarification to these concepts?
Well, thank you very much. This issue, particularly, let us conceptualize war, diplomacy, and power. In the international relations, these are three most dominant and the three most important things that one must understand in terms of the international relations, because these three components are the component that actually turn the international system. For instance, now when we are talking about war, in the international system, a war is a systematic way that is being used or being adopted using a violent means to actualize or to achieve national interest or to achieve nations' national interest. That is war on the basis of the international relations, because it is now trying to explain to us that for you to actualize or for you to achieve your national interest, you must embark on war. You must go to war. You must fight with your enemy or you must fight with your opponent, or you must fight with your neighbor before you may be able to achieve your national interest. So here, on this concept of war in the international system, it is the systematic use of violence to achieve one's nation's national interest. Now,
Wow.
if we are also looking about what is a diplomacy, it's a just simple thing. In terms of the conceptualizations of a diplomacy, we said it is also a systematic way of using negotiation and also a peaceful engagement to actualize or to achieve your national interest. Means there's no need of you going into war before you can achieve your national interest. We can just sit down on the negotiation table, we discuss, we negotiate in a peaceful way, and then I may be able to achieve my national what? Interest. Now let us also look at the power, because we said these are the most three dominant things that constitute idealism, or that constitute things in the international arena. So when we are looking at the power, they will tell you that it is the ability and the capability to influence a state actor to do whatever they are not ready to do, basically for the purpose of you achieving your national interest. So now, if I may be able to compile you, I may be able to force you, I may be able to enforce you to do something for my own benefit, that is a power. So these three things, they constitute the international what? They are things that are constituted in the international relations, and all of them are being used to actualize and to achieve national interest. So they are mostly interconnected. One cannot do without another in terms of the international relation, because the relationship that exists in the international body is all about how a state will achieve or actualize his own national interest. And in as much as I want to achieve or actualize my national interest, these three things, one, must be used. It's either for me to go to war to achieve it.
So countries cannot combine the two. They have to use one at a time.
It all depends
Okay.
on the modus operandi. Means it depends on the mode of operations. If I realize that you are too violent, I may be able to use the force. I may be able to use the war in trying to actualize my what? My national interest. But if I realize that no, you are not a kind of actor that always embark on using a violent, then I may be able to bring my diplomat. They sit with you, you discuss with them, and I may be able to achieve my national interest.
So we are trying to say that in a nation's process to achieve its national interest, it has to take one of these
Yes,
either
component.
diplomacy or the
War or power.
Or power.
Yes.
Wow. So looking at all these processes of how nations achieve their national interest, let's go back to the medieval era. The world has evolved, which war, power, and diplomacy is not an exception to this evolution to the world system. How has the international system evolved from the medieval era down to the current modern international system?
You know, when we are talking about the medieval era, we are talking about a situations whereby a nations or actors go into war in trying to gain more territories, not territories, in trying to make sure that they expand their what are they calling it? Their domain. At that time, the kind of war that is being fought is quite different from the 21st kind of war that we are fighting now.
Okay.
The kind of warfare at that time, at the medieval era, is quite different from this 21st century, or from the global, or from what I can say, from the globalization world that we are facing now.
Okay.
Because at that time, it is just like a confrontation between states and other states, direct confrontation to either allow them to expand their territory or to either allow them to expand their domain. It's not about, it is a war that is being fought to show that you are dominant. No.
Okay.
It is not about a war of hegemony. It is about a war of expansion.
Expansion.
Yes, expansionist. It is about a war of expansion. They are trying to expand their own territory. Maybe from territory A, they may be able to win a war on the territory B, and then they will conquer and dominate territory B. So they have expanded their what? Their own domain.
Wow. Wow. So let's look at the medieval and the modern international system now. How is the modern international system?
When we are discussing when we are discussing war, diplomacy, and power in 21st century, is quite different from the medieval era. In the 21st century, the issue of war has been dominated by a cyber. It has been dominated by the use of drone. It has been dominated by the use of science and technology. These are things that characterized the use of war and its apparatus in the 21st century, whereby drones are now being used to fight a war. We may be able to have a drone that there is no individual in the drone, but weapons are what are attached to the drone. Let's take, for instance, now between the Israel and the Hamas. These are two dominant countries in the Middle East, and they keep on fighting each other. There are two ways of negotiation. It fails. And immediately when those two ways of negotiation fail, what is happening now currently? It is what? The continuation of the what? Of the war. And in this aspect of the continuation of the war, it is not a traditional means of fighting the war. It is a modern means of the fighting the war, whereby missiles are being used, drones are being used, attacking of the cybersecurity are what? Are also being used. When the Hamas are what? Are blasting, are shooting, are releasing their missiles, likewise the Israelis are also doing the same thing. So this is to tell you that they have all decided to what? To force themselves into a war, trying to showcase that all of them have come to stay, that they have this modern technology of weapons.
Wow. So, sir, looking at, you made mention of the world has evolved from the medieval era where there is direct confrontation.
Yes.
Where they use what they call it, the primary arms like swords and arrow. And now we've seen the
use of drones,
and all these
and other missiles. Yes.
As a result of globalization. Globalization brings about these things. Now, how has this technological advancement impacted on diplomacy, not just the war aspects?
When we are talking about the impact of the technological advancement in diplomacy, immediately when we enter 21st century, the method in which a nations and other nations used to interact has changed. The method in which state actors usually interact with another state actors has also changed. Likewise, the method of state actors interaction and the non-state actors interactions has also changed because of the globalization and because of technology. Yet, even when we have realized the changes in terms of their interactions that bring about peace, because when we are talking about the things that usually bring about peace is the regular meeting of the United Nations organizations that they usually have. So one of the methods that allow them to communicate and also allow them to have a peaceful means of communication is the introduction of this artificial intelligence that may be able to translate your communication aspect to another state actor. Because at the United Nations organizations, when they are sitting for the meeting of negotiation or for the meeting of the diplomatic way of diplomacy, different nations gather there with different language. That is when we are talking about the social cultural aspect of it, with a different language. But because of the introduction of the technology, it has allowed them to communicate with using one language. Because no matter what language you are speaking, you may be able to have a device that may be able to translate that communication to your own understanding and to your own native language. This is one of the technological advancement that has been impacted in terms of a diplomacy. But however, the technological advancement that has been impacted on war have large number than the technological advancement that has been impacted on the diplomacy.
Wow.
Yes, because when we are talking about the diplomacy and its advancement in terms of technology, there is no way we can compare it with war and advancement of war in technology. Because when we are talking about war and its advancement in terms of 21st century or globalization, we may be able to talk about the drone, the use of drone. It is a technology. And when they realize that the use of drone is a technology, it is now allowing each and every independent state to own a drone of war. You can see how technology have advanced the use of weapons in where? In war. And this is what is happening. The same example between the Hamas and the Israel.
As recent as between
Iran, Israel, and the United States of America. You come today, So now let us just look at the Hamas and the Israelis. We are now trying to see the impact of technology in terms of diplomacy and what's what? War. So I'm saying here is that yes, the technology have advanced the use of diplomacy, but not the way it has advanced the use of war. Because it is because of the technology today that we are in now, that is why the proliferation of war is going on and on in the current international system.
Wow. Wow. So, sir, still talking about diplomacy, because I believe that diplomacy is one of the biggest tools that the United Nations organization uses in order to solve countries'
issues and problems,
yes,
and
issues and
conflicts.
problems and conflicts. But then there are some scholars that argue that diplomacy is a sign of weakness. How do you respond to this?
Well, when we are talking and then analyzing or explaining things of international importance, there is no way you can drive away the explanations and the analysis of other scholars. Yes, we have different categories of scholars that believe that even diplomacy itself has failed since the introduction of the League of Nations. And we also have some scholars are saying, no, diplomacy is still relevant in the international system. Because if not because of diplomacy, we are already deeply in the Third World War, or we are even advancing to either Fourth or the Fifth World War. But because of the introduction of the diplomacy, it has restricted us not to even verge deeply in the Third World War. When some other scholars will also tell you that no, diplomacy have automatically failed. Simply because immediately after the introduction of the League of Nations, when the objectives of the League of Nations failed, which is specifically to prevent war, to stop war, and then it was introduced, it was replaced by the United Nations Organization. And one of the objectives of the United Nations Organization is also to prevent another occurrences of what? Of war. And what we are facing today now, we are deeply in a well of war. Not in Africa, not in Asia, not in the Europe.
Wow.
So if you can see, in Africa, look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, they are in war. Look at Asia, between China and who?
You have to tell me.
Good. So when we are talking about the Asia, look at the China. They are also fighting their neighbors. And when we go to the Europe, look at the Russia and what? And Ukraine. They are also fighting the war. Now let us come to the Middle Europe.
Okay.
Let's come. We are still in the Europe. We are still in the West. United States of America is now fighting Iran. United States of America is now fighting Venezuela.
Yeah.
So this is to tell you that the essence and the objectives of the creations of the United Nations Organization as a diplomatic body, as a diplomatic avenue, as a diplomatic apparatus to stop war has failed. If we are going to put it on this scale.
Okay.
Yes, it has failed because there is no way, even though, yes, we know the international system is now trying to tell us that the system, and then, yes, the system itself doesn't have to do with morality. We don't have to do anything with the morality. Yet, even without the morality, there is no way an independent country's president should be or will be arrested by another independent country. Why?
So are you saying that the principle of rule of law, the United Nations Charter,
it has been violated? It has been violated. The Charter of the United Nations has been violated. The creation of the United Nations Organization has been defeated. The rationale behind its creation has been defeated. Unless if there is any small war, small misunderstanding, that is when they will begin to tell you that they are musical enough to address it, particularly when it has to do with Africa and Asia. But when it has to do with anything Europe, when it has to do with anything America, there has nothing to do. So in essence, what we are saying here is that, yes, war is a means to achieve national interest. Diplomacy is a means to achieve national interest. Power is a means to achieve national interest. But on the issue of the basis of the diplomacy, the entire basis of its creation has failed.
Wow. Wow.
because the world has now turned to the survival of the
The
fittest.
fittest.
Only the strongest ones in the world will survive. And this is what we are seeing.
Wow. So, sir, before we round up the show, let's look at just war. You made mention of earlier that the Third World War is already on. What are the positive and negative impact? Write us through the positive and negative impact, and what are those indices that have shown that there is third world?
Well, I think if I really want to digest this very well, I can even go back in 2019 when COVID-19 was introduced. There are many political analysts and the international relations studies scholars have said that the coming up of the COVID-19 itself is another third world war that allow nations not to produce, that allow nations not to interact, that allow nations to keep their weapon aside, that allow nations not to fight with one another, that allow nations to concentrate
On health.
you understand, on health issue. But ideally, they allow one or two nations to be operating at the global stance. And these nations that were busy operating at the global stance are the United States of America and what? And China.
China.
Why? Because at that time, these two dominant powers are fighting each other economically. They are trying to revamp their own economic stand between the United States of America and China, who is now growing at that time based on economic. Because based on a weapon, they have kept their weapon aside. China was busy producing health facilities. And it was busy even exporting health facilities when other nations are blocked, are locked, are closed.
Wow.
Many people are not traveling out. So that was the first indices of the sign of the Third World War. When times goes on now, there was a conflict in 2022 between the Russia and what?
Ukraine.
And the Ukraine. Why? Because the United States of America are supporting the Ukraine. And it have even allowed the Ukraine to break the agreement that was held between the Russians and the Ukraine in the eastern side of Europe. Before you know, there was what? There was bombardment. There was blasting, attacking each other's infrastructure. It was a sign of Third World War. Because by them doing that, a proxy war now came in. United States of America was supporting the Russians. And then other countries in the eastern part of what? In the eastern part were also supporting the Russians. The North Korea was supporting the Russian. The China was supporting the Russians. The countries of Fidel Castro, Cuba, they was supporting the Russians. The Venezuela was supporting the Russian. And then the United Kingdom, and then the Germany, and then the Portugal. All the Western Europe countries were also supporting United States of America in relation to Ukraine. To the extent that all these European countries have seized that opportunity to seize all the what? Assets of Russia. This is also another sign of the Third World War. And then look at recently what really happened. A president seizing or a president arresting another president.
Venezuela.
It is also a sign of Third World War. Look at also what is happening between the Israeli and the Hamas. They keep on fighting and bombarding each other. Yet there is also a proxy war behind them. Because the Israel is being supported by the US. And also, the Hamas are also being supported by Russia. And look at what is currently happening today. All the Gulf states, the Kuwait, the Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, all of them are in fire. They are on fire currently, even as we are speaking now. They are on fire. And each and every country now have now decided to lay its own what? Weapons up. They are testing their weapons. They are now testing their weapons. Go to North Korea. Kim is testing his own weapon. Go to China. He is testing his own weapon. Go to Russia. He is testing his own weapon. So this is to tell you that the world entirely now, as we are talking now, the world is facing a premises and a sign of a Third World War. If care is not taken, either now that we are talking or tomorrow, you might hear that it have escalated all over the world.
So looking at the impact, we all know that if two countries, especially they say when two elephants fight, the grass suffers.
Yes.
They are victims of war. What is your position on this country?
Well, this is a fact. The issue of we having a victim of war is a fact. Even those countries that are fighting the war, apart from the destructions of lives and the properties that they will face with one another, those individuals that are not directly into the war will also be affected. As we are talking now, the sea that the oil used to penetrate as a transport to come and distribute it to all over countries in the world has been blocked. No more going out of oil. Since there's no more going out of oil, yesterday, we were buying fuel like 800 or 900 naira. Today, we are buying it to 1,500 naira. Tomorrow, you see 2,000 naira. Next tomorrow, 3,000 naira, because the war is going on. And in as much as the war will keep on going on, people that will bear the consequences of this war are mostly the underdeveloped nations that doesn't have anything, the underdeveloped nations that did not prepare, the underdeveloped nations that don't produce, the underdeveloped nations that don't even have a political will, countries that are not ready to develop, particularly countries like Nigeria. So what I'm saying here is that it's not necessarily the impact negatively is only on the developed nations. Even the developed nations will face the consequences of the current war going on between the Israel, United States of America, and also the Iran. Because the Iran have decided not to lay down their weapons. Because they are seeing this war as a jihad. What we mean by jihad is an individual who has committed himself to fight for the sake of God. That even when he died, he's going to paradise straight. So there's nothing that will stop him from fighting that war. And there's no way you think of, okay, you killed my supreme leader, and then I'll just sit down and keep quiet. In as much as you can kill my supreme leader means I am nothing for you to be killed. So I rather come out and fight you to the last resort.
Wow.
So this war is a current global trend, and it keep on going on and on and on. Because Iran have decided not to lay down their weapons.
So, sir, rounding off the show now, looking ahead, what does the future of diplomacy has in the world shaped by power and conflict?
Well, actually, this one is a case of either being realist or idealist. But looking at the global stance now, we have endured idealism a lot. Enough. It is the high time countries should possess their own weapon. It is high time countries should have their own weapon, you have their own arsenal because of deterrence. Because what is happening today, if countries are not powerful enough and they don't have their own weapon in their own disposition or in their own possession, I am telling you that there will be a time that we are going to have a new wave of recolonization. Direct recolonization, not indirect recolonization. Because in as much as a Venezuela president, Maduro, will be arrested, and then tell me, who is free? In as much as Ayatollah Khomeini will be killed alongside with other defense ministers and his family. Tell me who is free? Nobody is free. And this one has keep on going on and on and on, where we can set example with Muhammad Gaddafi. We can set example with Saddam Hussein. All of them.
Thomas Sankara of
Burkina Faso. Even here in Africa. So in as much as the West are good in doing this, then we should have our nuclear weapon, the way the Kim Jong-un is doing, the way the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, is doing, and the way the Chinese president is also doing, the way the Castro of Cuba is doing. Because in as much as we say, we are going to be using only the diplomatic way, I am telling you that there will be a new wave of what? Recolonization. which will allow individuals in 21st century to be recolonized. Because there will be direct imposition. There will be direct conquer. There will be direct domination. And we know, yes, quite all right, the international system, they will tell you that we don't have one authority. We don't have one general government. And in as much as we don't have one general government, that was why, and that was why they created, that was why they created the United Nations organizations, to be checkmating the activities of other nations, so that they should not violate the use of excessive use of power. And today, all of them are the puppets. They are looking for one individual doing whatsoever he thinks is the best for him. Even in the house, 3 days ago, they sat down to decide on whether to continue the war or not to continue the war. The people that are in support of him, between the Republicans and the Democrats, they have the numbers. And they say the war continues. Yet, the United States of America want to cease fire because of the destruction that Iran is doing on their bases. But yet, they don't want to stop. And as I told you earlier, the Iranians are saying this war continues. And they will keep on attacking the bases of United States of America in the Gulf states.
Wow. Wow. So, sir, rounding up the show, what are your parting words in 2-3 sentences?
Well, you know, the international war is not a new thing. If you can go back to 1646, when we begin to have the issue of the Westphalia, when war began to come in, when nations begin to think of their own national interest, when nations begin to think of hegemony, when nations think that they are the best to be considered when we are mentioning countries in the world or in the international system or at the international arena. War will keep on going on and on and on because it is a means of actualizing national interest. And as it is now, the only means of realizing, actualizing, and achieving national interest is still the war.
Say, there's this saying that say war is inevitable. It can only be managed.
It is like a conflict. They will tell you conflict is inevitable. Likewise, war is inevitable. It can only be managed. How can it be managed? That was why the United Nations organizations and other organizations were introduced. But the question that you journalists or you scholars keep on asking us is that, has the United Nations organization fulfilled its main objectives of creation? It has not. Tell me one particular war globally that they succeeded in combating it. As a journalist, as a scholar, I don't think there is one particular war that the United Nations organization have succeeded in combating. There is not. And this is the main reason why they were created. And in as much as you are created basically because of this, and you are not actualizing it, but every day there will be a United Nations organization meeting for a diplomatic means. But yet, wars here and there. Wars here and there. Yeah. As it is now, other nations are seeing what is happening currently between Iran, Israel, and United States of America, and they are now trying to develop their own weapon for deterrence.
That's an eye-opener.
Of course, for deterrence. The same Senate of the United Nations are saying, United States are saying that suppose they know this is how the war will take place, they will have prepared better. So this is to tell you, even a small nation now will say, let me also have my own nuclear weapon. Even if I cannot fight any other person to defeat that particular person, if they attack me, I will also attack to show a deterrence, to show that I am also having that weapon. Wow. It's not that I am lambasting the use of diplomacy. Diplomacy, as we all know, used to be the best thing in terms of actualizing and achieving national interest. But as the world changing narratives now, as the global trend going on now, is diplomacy going to still be relevant?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed Ayuba, for having you on the show. We really appreciate this your insightful analysis on war, power, and diplomacy. Sure, we
You're
hope
highly
to see
welcome
you some other time when we call on you.
anytime.
All right, viewers, we've heard from our guest where he gave us in-depth analysis on war, power, and diplomacy. The question is, where is your stand? Where do you stand? War has been dominant since the creation of man, since mankind, and it will continue to be there. It can only be managed, it cannot be eliminated. So stay safe, and we are calling on world leaders to act on diplomacy and instead of war. Humanity first before any other thing like national interest. Stay tuned to Hardball Media on Diplomatic Talk. Do well to follow us on all our social media handles at Hardball Media. Goodbye for now.